The talk is we're going to have a Trump presidency again. But it's interesting, I think if you listen to him, and he is, obviously a very smart operator, whatever you think of his politics, that his message in Iowa was a conciliatory one when he's normally so aggressive.
What a turnout, what a crowd. And I really think this is time now for everybody, our country, to come together. We want to come together, whether it's Republican or Democrat or liberal or conservative. It would be so nice if we could come together and straighten out the world and straighten out the problems and straighten out all of the death and destruction that we're witnessing. That's practically never been like this. It's just so important, and I want to make that a very big part of our message. We're going to come together. It's going to happen soon, too. It's going to happen soon.
It's really interesting because you can hear his campaign advisors briefing him in advance and saying, for the last couple of years, you've been very anti-Democrat, anti-Biden, talking about kind of revenge and retribution, and that is not going to work for the swing voter when it comes to the presidential election, as opposed to these nomination caucuses where you're just appealing to that kind of core Republican vote. And if it sounds like you are using, the storming of the Capitol rhetoric, that will put off the swing voter, and therefore you need to have a more uniting, conciliatory message. The problem is, does that last beyond election day, or does he double down on the old Trump? And I guess I wondered, when you're out in Davos, the Americans, more broadly, business people you're talking to, are they thinking that Trump could be a better president in his second term? Are they kind of hoping for that more uniting, open message, or are they scared?
Well, I think, one of my favorite American expressions about politics is power is where power goes. And people are beginning to rationalize the possibility of a Trump presidency. I think it's a bit premature, to be fair. I think we shouldn't write off Joe Biden, who beat Trump last time. And at the moment, people are sort of giving their verdict on Biden in polls, but they're not yet faced with the kind of actual choice, Biden or Trump. So, I think it's a bit premature to say we're going to have Trump. But I think what is also right is I think that kind of idea that only crazies can vote for Trump, only the most kind of dispossessed, poorest, left behind people in America, people who cling to the Bible and the gun, the deplorables, as Hillary Clinton once described it. The idea that those are the only people who are supporting Trump is such a mistake. There's a very smart Harvard political professor called Graham Allison, who's just written an article called "The Trump Put," and what that means is that people are beginning to anticipate the possibility of a Trump presidency, not just the American business community, but the international community, and that is going to have a huge impact on foreign policy on issues like Ukraine, Gaza, and so on.
That's right. But the problem is, we were just talking about how what business wants is stability and predictability. And that is what Trump doesn't offer, because the problem is we don't know what Trump will get. I think the betting markets at the moment are broadly Trump 40%, Biden 30%, somebody else 30%, and that can shift. But in the Trump-Biden race, Trump is winning. But which Trump will we get? Will we get a Trump who says, I fought China on trade in my first term and I won, and therefore we can now work together? Or does he double down on tariff Trump who wants to erect trade barriers? Does he say, I warned Europe in NATO and they're stepping up? Or does he follow through with the idea that when it comes to war on the continent of Europe, and that includes in Ukraine, he's disengaging? When it comes to to Taiwan, we talked about this recently. What stance does he take if he starts to get into fights with a new, more nationalist president there? We don't know which Trump we're going to get, and that is, at minimum, a source of great uncertainty, and it could be a dangerous Trump.
But this could well be, couldn't it, Ed, like one of the absolute kind of defining challenges for a Labour government, because they could be elected almost exactly the same time. And people like Keir Starmer, David Lammy, the Shadow Foreign Secretary. I mean, in the past, David Lammy has said that Donald Trump is a Ku Klux Klan sympathizer. And, he may end up being the person who has to sit across the table and negotiate with the American president on key issues like continuing American engagement in Ukraine. What do you think, Ed? I mean, in many ways, the sort of one of the absolute sort of defining features of the Blair Brown years was the relationship with a Republican president, George W. Bush. How will Starmer, Lammy, and co. handle Trump? And does it pose real problems for the left?
Look, of course it's right. You have to be pragmatic. And of course, it's not for Keir Starmer to decide who is the president of America. It's for American voters. And if they vote for Donald Trump, then that's who you work with. That is democracy. But I think that the important thing is you have to start putting some markers down. David Lammy, in his interview in the Sunday Times at the weekend, was saying there will be some differences, but there are many more areas on which we can continue to work together. And that's fine. There will be areas where you can work together. But I think you need to put down the markers where you have like a principled view. I think one lesson you might draw from the challenges that Keir Starmer faced in Israel, Gaza after the October 7th attack from Hamas into Israel, and then the Israel response is that that maybe he needed to have laid down some principles in advance, which he could come back to, because if not, it looks too pragmatic. And from a Labour government point of view, you need an America which is respecting democracy and the rule of law within America. You need an America which is a player in NATO and a reliable partner.
But they're not going to have this, are they? So how they may need it, but they're not going to have it, are they?
But I think the same is true on trade.
If it's a Trump presidency.
Well, if Trump ends up in office doing things which are very, very kind of damaging, unacceptable, and at that point you have to respond and push back. That is a much harder thing to do. It's better to have laid down your position in advance and say, we've always been clear that this is the global community. This is what mutualism and respect and cooperation is all about. And so if you start to see America playing damagingly fast and loose in Ukraine or with trade policy, then you need to be able to challenge that. And you need to be able to challenge that from a position of principle. And I would be laying down my markers now. I wouldn't be waiting. I wouldn't simply have a pragmatic, we work with whoever we get approach. I would say, well, of course we'll work with whoever we get and we'll respect the result of the American election. But let's be clear, we have a view of the world and we have principles which guide us. And we think we have mutual obligations to each other in the international community. And this is what they are. Because if not, the danger is you look like you're blown around.